Whoa, whoa, whoa. There, we got it straight. Do a little adjusting there. What's going on, y'all? What's going on? First of all, oh yeah, you could tell this joint new. You could tell that's brand new. That's still wrinkled in the front. Shout out to everybody that was repping and up at Art All Night in DC. As well as Adams Morgan Day and all that. Shout out. You'll probably see some new artwork in the back pretty soon. I'm very excited about that. It's been a while since we had some additions in the back. I don't think anything has gotten added to the back. I'm not going to turn it all the way around because I don't know if I got coverage. So I don't know. I think my enhancements. If I would have did a live on Monday, I'd turn it all the way around. But I don't know if my enhancements would support that. I think the last edition we had in the back was the YouTube plaque. So yeah, we're gonna have some additions in the back. I'm excited about that. Welcome, my man Patrick. Welcome. Happy to have you aboard. And shout out to all of the mods in the house. Deshauna, Kristen, obviously Miss Ray. Appreciate you guys for being here. I see Regina's here. Shout out. So, how y'all doing? How are y'all doing? What's going on, Darlene? Shout out to you over on Facebook. Appreciate it. Lovely Nola, I'm sorry that I missed you. Definitely keep it classy in the chat. I see Shy Money says stressed. Let me start here. And, excited to bring on my esteemed guest, Luke Thomas. Very fortuitous that we had booked this on this particular day. But let me start here. I started to make this a members video. I might still make it a members video and talk a little bit more about it. But yesterday, I happened to see a video. I believe it was posted by... I can't say it was posted by a MAGA. I'm not really sure exactly who the guy was that posted it. But it was directed at young white Christian men from a young white Christian man and denouncing the culture wars that have left the middle class and the working class fractured and muted the opposition to the administration and the damage that they have done to both the middle and the working class. And the video was pleading not to take the bait on the weaponization of Charlie Kirk's death. Now, that is something that I grapple with almost daily, because as I've articulated here, the righteous frustration and anger that I feel often at the last several years, I would say, of our political discourse, doesn't necessarily create the warmest environment for collective action. And, just as an example, I've had these conversations with Coach D. I had this conversation with Coach D when he came here, and I talked about the challenge that I face when I do FAFO content, because they deserve all of this action. At the same token, those are the people that need to be awoken to the manifestations of the right-wing media machine. And I do mean machine. And the last few days, we've seen that at play. We've seen that at work. To the point where a few days ago, no, I won't say a few days ago. This was probably about 2 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, I happened to begin to see assertions that I think Stephen Miller actually might have came out and spoke out of turn, because I think he was talking like this weeks ago, where they were talking about trying to criminalize the Democratic Party, trying to criminalize progressive politics, and using their hands on the FBI and the Department of Justice to do so. Now, that just sounds absurd and patently un-American. To try and criminalize the opposing party sounds like an absurd thing to do. And now, in light of Pam Bondi's comments about hate speech and what exactly constitutes hate speech, apparently that's for them to decipher. The people who, and by the way, you have to connect every dot to Trump, because we've seen them bend to his whims at every point. So you have to connect every dot to Trump himself. So naturally, it would be up to him to decipher what is hate speech. The man who, mere hours after Charlie Kirk was shot, had a whole diatribe lamenting radical leftists and talking about all of the losses that they had suffered and omitting the other. That is the mind that's going to assess what exactly is and isn't hate speech. Now, I've mentioned this in several videos already, but I'm not going to miss an opportunity to mention it. The blatant hypocrisy in using Charlie Kirk to clamp down on free speech. Moreover, I have seen Trump. Now, who was it? Trump? I can't remember who this was. Who went on Fox News? I think it might have been Stephen Miller, who went on Fox News and talked about pressing news and media outlets for spreading propaganda and lies. I said, is that a road you want to go down? Is that a precedent that how many buttholes puckered in the studio of Fox News when he said that? Fascinating. Also fascinating to see where all the free speech warriors are on the right. All the free speech warriors who always want to support, stand on, and stand defiant in their ability to be racist. We will not be censored. We assert our ability to be able to express ourselves and say what we want to say. Well, apparently, their dedication to free speech started and ended with slurs. That was it. Apparently, that's all free speech was actually about. Not only the free speech warriors, also all of the comedians and the podcasters and, all those renegades on the right, the anti-woke folk. We're the anti woke folk commenting on what we can and cannot say. Huh? That's fascinating. I haven't heard a lot in opposition to Trump and Stephen Miller and Bondi from the hardcore podcasters and comedians. You know, the people that can't be censored haven't said a word. That is really interesting. That's really interesting because I don't know, you know, if your identification with saying what you want to say and being uncensored and unable to be canceled and all that, if that begins and ends with supporting the current regime, I think we might have a difference in what those words mean. I think we might have a real difference of opinion in what those words mean. And it actually reminds me, and they probably telegraphed this, to be completely honest. They probably telegraphed this because it actually reminds me of one of my great frustrations. You guys know that sometimes I find random things to get really all upset and bent out of shape about. But one of my great frustrations eternally is the politicization of criminal justice and criminal justice reform. Because it is insane to me that opposition to any level of oversight was a position. Like that was a real position. Opposition to a group of people saying that their lives mattered was actually a position. And not only was it a position, it was a position from the don't tread on me camp. It was a position from the, you know, we just want to be left alone and unencumbered by the government. It was that camp that staked out the no oversight position. Now, why would they do a thing like that? I mean, that is completely contradictory to your stated goals, aims, and virtues. Why would you do a thing like that? If not for your stated goals and aims and virtues being subject to your racism. In that case, it's subject to your racism. Now, in this case, it remains to be seen exactly how far off the ground any of this will get when it comes to free speech and hate speech. But one thing that has been apparent to me just in the last 18 or so hours, right? In the last 18 or so hours, I've prepared a couple of videos and I recorded 2 today talking about the schism on the right wing with regards to Epstein and with regards to Israel. Obviously, 2 issues that, well, at least in the case of Epstein, Charlie Kirk broke with the administration. With Israel, there's a purported break with the administration. So for opposition to Charlie Kirk apparently being a criminal offense, not only do you have to completely violate your own stated purpose for memorializing Charlie Kirk, not only do you have to violate his own positions that he staked out for himself, but then you have to pick and choose exactly who you're going to hold accountable for that, because a lot of even those people come from the right. You got those people all over the right as well. So yeah. Let me also say this before I bring on our esteemed guest, because it's something that I think bears repeating. Ah, uh-oh. Uh-oh, hold on. All right, I'm not sure exactly what happened there. I'm gonna try and get my other camera back up. But in the meantime, we can rock with this. Curious that happened, isn't it? It's curious. That's funny. Let me say this. No jersey for lives. I do have a jersey back there. I got my DC United jersey back there. You just can't see the jersey because I'm covering it up right now. My forehead looks big with this camera. I don't. My forehead look way too big on this. See, that's why I don't record my regular videos like this. That's wild. I TJ said I seen it. That's funny. Let me say this. I almost didn't do the live last week. I'm glad that I did, but I almost didn't do it. And the reason being was because there's very few guardrails that have been respected by this administration. We've seen the ground that's been covered in less than 7 days already. And we have seen the partisan push or pull from our Justice Department. And the reason why I was hesitant to do a live last week was because I did not want to create a forum where people might say things that would get themselves in trouble. I decided to do it anyway, but one thing that I can't communicate in strongly enough terms is that when it comes to the internet, Streets is watching. All right, as I see this breaking news scroll about Trump telling ABC News, Jonathan Karl, we'll probably go after people like you because you treat me so unfairly, it's hate. Streets is watching. I think one of the things that I heard a long time ago was, what does it have to be said? Does it have to be said now? Does it have to be said now like this? Something like that. I totally messed that up. I think I totally butchered that saying. Just because you feel that way doesn't mean you have to say it on the internet. We know what have I said here before? America catches a cold, Black folks get pneumonia. It's not just us. It's also other disenfranchised. We know who the targets are and going to be, have been. We've seen that, right? Keep that in mind. Okay. Somebody said turn the camera off and back on. StreamYard will pick it up. Oh, I'm gonna turn the camera off and back on and see if StreamYard will pick it up. Hold on. Whose suggestion was that? This will be the last thing I do, and I'm gonna edit projects. We're gonna try it. We're gonna try it. Edit projects. Okay, here we go. Okay. That was really weird that happened. The camera did legitimately turn off. Okay, let's see. Camera. Okay. All right. All right, I edit projects. Shout out to you. Shout out to you. And I'm looking crispy. And I'm looking crispy from the side. Okay. Hold on. I'm gonna do the whole interview like this. I'm gonna do the whole interview looking like number 5 on the barber shop. Just bam. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm happy I don't have to look at my own forehead. And I'm sure my guest will be happy he doesn't have to look at my forehead as well. Before I bring him in, I want to thank you, Nicole. Shout out to you. Carrie on top. Thank you for reacting without being reactionary this week. It's been a rough one. I really appreciate you. Thank you, Carrie. I very much appreciate that. Welcome to Pam with the bad hair. Thank you. Thank you to Karen. And if you were a recipient of one of Karen's gifts, send Karen some love. Thank you, Araceli. Welcome to Leadfoon. Welcome. And NYW. Thank you. If you receive one of NYW's gifts, send them some love as well. Shout out to you, Edit Projects. Much love. All right. Now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome in somebody I'm sure you guys have seen on these YouTube streets, talking not only MMA, but also his more recent channel, Luke Thomas Gets Political. My man, Luke Thomas. What is going on, my friend?
I have to say, it is about time that I showed up on another podcaster's show, and maybe in this case, more relentlessly pro DC than I am. That is quite a feat, I have to say. The Washington Monument, DC United hoodie, you got the flag on the shirt.
Yeah.
I mean, I am very happy to see this. As a pro DC guy myself, this is quite heartening to see.
Now, wait, are you a native, Luke?
I've been here since the 80s, man.
Wow.
I grew up on East Capitol Street.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
We gotta catch up. I grew up in PG County, but
I lived in Oxon Hill for 2 years. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, small world, man. That's awesome.
I saw that. I was like, no way. He's relentless. He's a big old DC guy.
Yeah.
Yup. Sure is. So happy to see that. Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I had to return back. So granted, I guess, was it just by osmosis that you felt like you had to traverse the path outside of MMA into the political space in order to lend your voice?
You know what? It was kind of funny. I never even thought of it exactly in the terms of like the timing of it all. But someone was asking me the other day, hey, when did you start doing the political stuff? And I was thinking to myself, yeah, right around, I don't know, January or February. And then it's like, oh, right, when he took office and everything fell ill immediately. And it wasn't a plan. And to be honest, people ask me, like, what is your plan? I don't really know. I don't know what I'm doing. But I just know that I feel like I'm sitting on a bed of nails at all time. And I need to get up and scream about it. And So I mean, I cover MMA and boxing predominantly. That's what I've done for the last basically 20 years. I just put up, by the way, for folks who might be interested, I put up a Bud Crawford breakdown if you saw the fight this weekend. Basically, Trump 1 was bad, but Trump 2 feels real bad. So
yeah, I definitely want to. I by the way, I shout out to you on your Bud breakdown. I couldn't get enough Bud this weekend, and I do want to hit that at some point. But your journey to where you are right now, I'm curious as to if it mirrors mine, because having grown up in this area, my mother worked on Capitol Hill for a decade, my whole entire childhood and life. So I was just always around the Cannon building and the Rayburn building. And sometimes when I watch television shows like The Americans, right? Remember the show The Americans, FX, where they were in
the
DC?
spy thing, right?
Yeah. And it was a lot of like old 80s, furniture that was in a lot of these office buildings. And I watched that and it just makes me feel like mother's milk. Like it just takes me home again. I was like, I bet nobody has ever watched this show and felt like a level of child nostalgia as I feel to see these oversized desks and these large leather padded chairs. But so I kind of grew up around all this stuff, but I became so disillusioned round about the early 2000s. It was actually Bush 2. No, it might have been Bush 1. But Bush, W. So around W time, I became really disillusioned. I think, the Bush Gore election really threw me. And then the aftermath of 9/11 really threw me. I was actually in New York for that. So I didn't react particularly well to that. So I could not get further away from politics. I wanted absolutely nothing to do with it. And I was really disgusted by it, quite frankly, and went as far away as I thought I could go, which was comedy, right? But my journey in comedy kind of brought me, in a decade and a half, right? Brought me back to this place where I said, and I was doing sports and stuff like that. And I said, if I'm going to spend my time just really analyzing this stuff and really, giving my opinion on this stuff, I would want it to be for stuff that I feel like matters. Because I feel really strongly about, all of these real life issues that are affecting people, healthcare, cost of housing, racism, criminal justice, all that kind of stuff. I feel really strongly about this stuff. I don't feel nearly as strongly about the Lakers power forward, but that's how I'm spending my time. That's what my life will have been spent on. So it started really on social media, right? Starting social media accounts and posting on social media, which then led to a full-blown channel. But I kind of ended up back in this place, and then literally physically back in DC. Not only back in DC, but also back into this place in terms of what I'm doing and how I'm spending my life in the place that I fled 20 years ago. I was like, how did this happen?
Dude, I can't say I have all the same contours, but if some of that sounded like it rhymed with my life a little bit. My dad worked in the State Department, which is why we were here. Mm-hmm. They got split up. So, I eventually finished high school in Georgia, but, obviously going back and forth between them. But after getting out of college, so that's 2002, I watched 9/11 from my dorm room. That was a pretty serious event. And I had, I would say, some kind of, I don't know, stupid college view of the world. Some left, some right, totally incoherent. I hadn't really thought much about the world in any kind of deeper way. And then basically the invasion of Iraq happened, and that was a deeply radicalizing event. Mm-hmm. My dad, I'll never forget this. I'll never, ever forget this. My dad, I remember before the war, was like, we know he doesn't have WMDs. We know he's just doing it to posture to Iran. My dad, when he worked in the State Department, spent his time in the Middle East. This was his area of expertise. He was like, I'm sure of it. We know he doesn't have it. And then to watch them manufacture and go through with it. And I was in the Marine Corps Reserves at that time. By the skin of my teeth, I avoided having to go. I consider that one of the biggest blessings of my life. But I watched a generation of young men in their 20s go over there. I've been to both the old and the new Walter Reed and seen what it's done to people. That maybe more than anything changed who I was big time. And then to watch the country re-elect Bush there was no going back from that, right? That was it for me. So, but I started doing speech writing in DC. I don't know, what year was that? 2006 or 7, something like that. And I hated it because the only people who need your job for the kind of work we were doing were really bad people. Mm-hmm. And it was the first job at a prestigious place I'd ever gotten, and I'll just keep the name private. But it was so unhealthy for me that my fingernails fell out, and I had to quit after 2 years. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to make a run at MMA coverage. I'm going to move the exact opposite direction. I can't live my life working for people like this. But then a funny thing happened along the way. I think the barriers between what you can and can't talk about are not as distinct as they once were. There's some limits, it appears, but not really big ones. If you want to talk sports and, I don't know, comedy, politics, whatever, there's more license now than there once was to do that. And then just to watch what is happening to media discourse. Now, just today, Mark Andreessen is going to, among others, Silver Lake and Oracle is going to own part of TikTok. You have all of this oligarch aligned with the administration owned media. But even before this, obviously, I was like, this feels wrong. This feels bad. And honestly, MMA has a particular valence here because I think part of what MMA did was help young men get accustomed to the idea that Trump is a cool guy. Like, it definitely his image. And so, like, it's weird. I went to the sport, and remember, this is 2007. I'm like, I'm going to go to the sport that is so disconnected from major society. It's going to be great. And it came all the way back around into the White House, and it kind of just brought me to this.
It is. It's kind of spooky, like the convergences. I know we have a common friend in Ant, and he kept telling me that, you got to talk to Luke. You got to talk to Luke. And I had no idea how many, starting with the fact. So you're 02 college, 98 high school.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't date myself like specifically ever. Normally I'll just say elder millennial, but I tip my cap, my friend. There we really, you know what? I'm just going to the laptop.
Yeah, dude, they don't want your camera to work today. I believe me, I've had a million struggles, so don't sweat it.
Yeah. There we go. The number of rants that I have had about the fact that in a 7-year stretch, we don't get to be 2099 or 2001 for anything. Literally every other class gets to claim something for high school or college, but the 98s and the 02s are asked out for all of it. That's
we're just stuck with a bad hand, but you know what? This was the one we got dealt, Could
have been class of 2000. Could have been 99. Nope. You get 98 and 02. Congratulations. That's awesome. Also, the way I connected to Ant was actually through Ariel.
Okay.
I'm an old school MMA fan, going back to Matt Hughes. I used to my first fantasy team was called Full Contact Fighter.
No way.
I go back to Matt Hughes and Jens Pulver and all those
old school, super old school.
And I like MMA. I like contact sports. I in general, because I subscribe to something I think Max Kellerman talked about, where he said if there's a baseball game on one corner and a soccer match on one corner and a fight going on over here, where's the crowd? Like, they're all watching the fight, right? In some ways. But I have had to, since you mentioned that, MMA kind of being the thing that brings you full circle and the specific valence that gives you, I had to walk away, because if you're going to bring, I was annoyed enough by what I perceive as the toxicity of the fan base. But once you start to bring not the president, but a candidate into events and parade him, octagon side, well, you've said fuck you to every fan that you may have had that has a difference of opinion. And that's just purely speaking left and right. That's beyond what we've heard outside of that about, kind of cultural conditioning kinds of things. You've told me how you feel about me as a fan. And quite frankly, I don't like to feel in any of my relationships that discarded and abused. So I will find something else to do with my time.
My God, can I tell you that what you just told me is something that I have gotten through people on the street, DMs, emails, you name it. I have friends who have all had basically one version or another of the exact same thing you just said, which is, I was in this because this was cool and irreverent and different. And yeah, a little edgy. And, it's not going to be PC all the time, but it seemed different and new and exciting. And, you got a glimpse into a different life and people from all over the world. It was crazy. And then somewhere along the way, it stopped being that. And it became, I always try to explain this. Well, let me just finish the point, which is, I cannot tell you how many people have written me to tell me that they're leaving the sport. They can't take it anymore. They're done. It is unbelievable to me to have lived long enough to have seen MMA. And this is where you came in based on what you're telling me, which is, there was a point in time where MMA was new and exciting, but it had a particular mission, which was, we know what we have is great, and we know what we have can be big. and we're going to prove it to you. We're going to prove skeptics wrong. We're going to prove to you we're going to bring in women, and it's going to be some of the biggest fights ever. We're going to prove we can take this internationally. We're going to prove we can do big ratings on TV. We can prove we can work for young kids, men, women, gay, straight, tall, white, black, short. We're going to price tickets at affordable level. Working class people, and of course, the expensive ones at the front can be there for them, but we're going to have real fight fans, rock-ribbed fight fans at our events. We're going to be the sport for everyone in a way that you never imagined, and if you want to be a part of this, we want you here. That was expressly the message for the vast majority of my time during the sport. But right around COVID, and in particular after that, all that changed. And they basically said, I mean, not formally, they have not, I want to be clear, they've not actually said this, but the strategy of the company has basically been, okay, we're not doing that anymore. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to be kind of like a lifestyle brand. We're going to be a brand for a certain kind of demo. And we know that what we're going to do is we're going to lose a bunch of people that we had, but we're going to make a gamble. And that gamble is, even though we're going to lose a bunch of people, we are going to keep a bunch of people who are smaller in stature or size, rather. However, they're going to be much more loyal. They're going to be here until the bitter end. That is the calculation that they are making. And I don't, just from a business standpoint, as I'm not addressing it from what it must mean to be alienated from a brand that you loved, or in my particular case, the many sleepless nights asking myself, is it even ethical what I'm doing? I don't even know, right? So there's lots of problems, but just on a business calculation, I don't know if that's a bad call. It might be the right call as a business for their interests. But what I do know is it's a different sport now with a different audience making a different claim.
That's interesting to kind of conceptualize it as a conscious choice. It's almost like what's better or worse, the conscious choice or just like stumbling in it, like disregard. I have this debate when it comes to a lot of our elected officials, like the ones that know better, like the grifters
Right.
are the ones that are really,
Right.
they're really there. It's something that kind of, you select and you kind of grow and percolate this cauldron of like-minded people, but it's the through line is like grievance. That's at least what I see on Capitol Hill. The through line is grievance, not any particular viewpoint on the world. Like their through line is grievance, unless you call that your viewpoint on the world, which I guess some of them would, right? Problem is in actually trying to construct something and govern. The problem is in actually trying to keep them in some sort of organizational shape in order to try and push something that would be helpful to people. That's where kind of like the problems lie. And so I see, at least in as much as I pay attention to it now still, whenever there's a big fight, I have my cheat moments. Whenever there's a big fight, I go peek over and see what all is going on. And then inevitably I'll stumble on over to X, and within about 5 to 7 tweets, I'm like, okay, all right, there, and there it is right there, and there it is. And so I'm like, okay, so you've essentially made it inaccessible.
That's right.
To people that aren't down with that. So if that is a conscious choice, that's all well and good. But I mean, you gotta hope that those people can support a whole. There's a lot of people that are making the gamble that a very specific segment of our population is going to prop up their entire brand.
That's exactly what it is. I mean, because the reality is, it's very easy to say, well, the UFC made a conscious choice to do this, which I do think they did. I'm not backtracking at all. But one of the things that I wrestle with is like how much of that was an organizational pivot in a way where like internally they fully considered it. And then rather how much of it is just that's what right-wing people do now. And the fan base in large part now, most of the fighters, the vast majority of the fighters, obviously most of the managers, most of the people in the sport all the way up to the leadership, they're just right-wing. And as change took over their priorities and their behaviors and what they wanted, that's how it just bled out into all their decision making, right? So it's a question of like how conscious it all was. I mean, it was a pivot. It's just, you know, it's hard to say exactly what precipitated it, but to your point, it's a very insular way of looking. You know, it's like we need, like, it's us now, and we need this to make it all work. And I think right now, I mean, this is, you know, I have lived through a time when the right was not ascendant, and now I'm living through a time when it is ascendant. You know, I don't know what the future holds, and part of what those are is a scary look into what could happen. But the other part is that it won't be ascendant for you know, obviously forever. And as a consequence, what happens when they're not, and everything begins to collapse in on itself, and when there's infighting, and, you know, what happens when Donald Trump is no longer the literal figurehead of this party? You know, and again, maybe it's old age, maybe it's 10 years from now, but at some point he will not be in that place. What happens to this thing at this moment? And so it's kind of an interesting gamble. There's a bit of interesting data beyond this. I know this is MMA specific. I'll just leave you with this piece, which is there is broader data to suggest globally MMA might be on the decline. It's not exactly clear, but in the three major markets, Russia, Brazil, and the United States, events are going down year over year and have been for quite some time at this point. It got kind of propped up 2016 with like the Conor McGregor era. And so it's like the UFC just signed a $7.7 billion deal, 1.1 billion, which is well above expectations. And it's like, okay, so you're good for 7 years. What happens after that? What happens after that? I don't know the answer, but I think we're going to find out. And to your point, if you have made this pivot in such a way where you're like, it's us now, we have to take care of this now, I don't know what happens long term.
You mentioned not knowing what the future holds. So I'll be remiss not asking you about the immediate future, about how you feel as somebody that creates content that is, you know, progressive, about where we sit right now on a day that, you know, Pam Bondi's making threats about hate speech. What's your level of concern?
I just don't see how this doesn't. I'm just going to be real with you. Okay. I don't see how this doesn't turn bad. I just don't see how this doesn't get ugly. I don't know exactly how that will look, and I have no timeline. These are events that are beyond my capacity to properly order, but we're not even a year into this, and the damage that they've done. I mean, even if the administration had, you know, oh, they can only serve for however long they've been in office. What is it, 9 months, give or take, whatever it is at this point. That after that, you know, they'd have to leave office. Even if they left office tomorrow, there is extensive damage already, to say nothing of what's going to be there after 4 years. Hello, Trump already tried to steal the election in 2020. What makes anybody think that you're going to have free and fair elections in 2028, to say nothing of 2026? They're already talking about the Democratic Party being terrorists. They're already threatening. Now, Pam Bondi did walk it back from hate speech to hate speech that incites violence, like, you know, which is a pretty actually significant walk back. But nevertheless, there's all of this agitation. Fundamentally, which this is a lesson I've learned. Fundamentally, there are huge portions of the right that do not believe in the left's right to govern. Period. That's why they tried to steal the election in 2020. They clearly don't respect the electorate, you know, and then all the diverse groups that come from it. Hello, look what they're doing to attack every part of that in every possible way that they can. But more to the point, like that's what January 6th was about. When the North Carolina governor, the Democratic one, comes in, what did the legislature do? They stripped out a bunch of his powers and all the way down his administration to make it hard for them. Look at what they're trying to do with gerrymandering. Look at what they're trying to do with you know, largely minority blue cities, DC, where you know, we call home, and Chicago and LA, and yes, they might go into Memphis. I'll see what that looks like, but that's also a place that's not asking for it. And hello, Memphis also has a pretty interesting demographic makeup. So the point I'm trying to make is these are not people that believe that they have to share power with us. It's gonna get bad. I did an interview with Abdul El Sayed, who is running for Senate in Michigan. He's Bernie Sanders endorsed. He's like the guy when it comes to Medicare for all. Great guy, great candidate. hope he wins. But I interviewed him and I asked him a very basic question. I'm not asking you to commit crimes. Nobody is asking anybody to break the law at all in any capacity whatsoever. But in the interest of protecting a constitutional order, are you willing to be jailed? Because I'm sorry, if you're a Democratic primary candidate and you can't give a straight answer to that question, get to stepping. I have no interest. I'm not voting for anybody willing to lay down, because even if we elect nothing but, like hard-nosed fighters, basically, whatever you want to call that, guys who show, pushback, even then we're on thin ice. Anything less than that, and I don't know what to tell you, it's going to get bad. My view is deeply negative, no question about it.
I think that, and I don't disagree with anything that you said. I think their actions have reflected that there is a significant number of them that feel that way about our right to govern. It's also quite indicative of how they see the electorate. Like, you can't simultaneously gerrymander and talk about how you have a mandate and the will of the people. Those two things don't go together. Now, they'll argue them at the same time, which speaks to where the bar is set at what they feel like their base will swallow. It literally gets lower and lower every day, like to the point of Charlie Kirk as a tragic figure because of him expressing his right to free speech while we tamp down on it, like that kind of lowering of the bar. Obviously, there is a significant portion of them that feel that way, that we don't, that they don't feel like we have the right to govern. It is fascinating to also not have them have any level of accountability about a whole host of things, but specifically in this regard, how that's gone, how you governing has gone. Like, when people object to your governing, you dismiss them as radical leftists. So there can't actually be any legitimate objection to your governing. So it begs the question of, on what basis are you supporting your superior right to govern? Like, what is that based on? Like, is it based on religion? Because I even would question that, because of the myriad of ways in which you stretch and pull and cut and nip and tuck the core tenets that are in the Bible. So what are you basing that on? Now, granted, I could give some suggestions, but I'm curious as to what you think.
Yeah. They're trying to impose a racial order. I mean, it's not just that. It's something of a class order in certain cases. In certain cases, it's something of a religious order. There are people that want, Christendom to be the dominant driving cohesive force of society, but they're just trying to establish, I think in part a racial order with all of this. That's, to me, that's just, I don't even think that they're even hiding that necessarily. I mean, that seems pretty apparent to me. This is the lesson I've learned about the right more recently, which is, you do get some people who I definitely know, doesn't mean I agree with them, but I definitely do know some pretty moderate, principled conservatives. I have seen that. Okay. So that's a real thing. For example, even today, the House took up a bunch of bills to change DC laws, and the only conservative who voted against them was Thomas Massey. There's a lot I don't like about him, but like, he votes along a certain degree of principle. Something to be said for that. However, the point I'm trying to make is, basically what they believe in is nothing. So many of them. This is not a point you probably haven't heard before, but it's really quite true. And it's kind of funny, actually. The way that I first encountered it was in sports media, because there was this huge debate. I'm sure you remember this in like the late 2000s, early 2010s. There was this pretty big debate inside of sports media. Is the established sports media too liberal, and are they making everything too much about politics? This is at a time when the original Deadspin pre-Hogan trial was at like its peak. You know what I mean? And there were certainly some debates you could have had around that, but what you kept hearing was, I mean, look at Travis. What was the dude from Outkick the coverage? Clay Travis, yes. Who once, by the way, people forget this. This is why I can't take these dudes seriously. I once had a Twitter battle with him because he suggested Ronda Rousey fight Floyd Mayweather. Hey, Clay.
I remember that. Please
walking. But then they turn into like these political actors, and you're like, this guy? Mm-hmm. This guy's a political actor? Okay. But anyway.
He pops up anytime it's convenient to say go woke, go broke.
That's right.
And be completely ignored and nowhere to be found when the opposite is proven to be true. But yeah, go ahead.
But what he wrote a book, I think, called Republicans Buy I think it's like Republicans Buy Sneakers Too, or Republicans Buy Tennis Shoes Too. It was like a cribbed quote from Michael Jordan about why he wasn't political, because he wanted to sell as many Jordan shoes as possible, and then Republicans buy Jordans too, is sort of the implication. But then look at what he does now. Like, it's pretty clear that's not what he wanted at all. What they did not want was neutrality. What they wanted was the imposition of their views, and they resented that there was an imposition of views that they didn't agree with. That was the game from the beginning. That is the game now. You're asking a slightly different question, which is about like what is undergirding all of this. And there's many different subgroups that want some kind of thing. I do think a uniting force, of course, is racial superiority and homogeny is part of what their driving forces. Whether they make that explicit or not, there are other factors as well, as we've kind of indicated. But the one thing that it all comes down to is you cannot, like, I'm not saying there's not a point for debate, and there are a lot of normal people that can be persuaded and influenced, and that's who you're trying to reach, and that's the point of advocacy. But at the same time, this other group that I'm talking about, like, there's no bargaining with them. They have to be defeated. They have to be defeated within the rules and within appropriate means, but they need to be defeated. They only care about the imposition of worldview. They only care about rigging the rules for themselves. They don't like, I see so many liberals online doing this dumbass stuff, being like, look at their hypocrisy. Do you think that they care? Do you think that their audience cares? Nobody cares about any of that. They have to be defeated. And so, as I indicated, a few things backing it all, but in the end, there's only one policy prescription, and it's their defeat at the voting ballot box, I should say.
That is one of the challenges when you see some of the hypocrisy. Is like right now I'll hit them as they I'll like Mario, like I'll take the coins on my journey. I can't just ignore it. Like I can't just act like it's normal. Like I have to, like, we have to bring up. But you said something in a video. I think it was, you were talking about MMA's right-wing problem. But you talked about the fans and how there are, I forget how you phrased it, but you talked about ways in which they are reachable. And you do feel like they are still reachable on some level. I would love to hear you expound on that. I was watching the video. I was like, yeah. And you kept talking about the actual topic of the video.
Oh, right.
I was like, that.
I have but a few answers, but they've been promising enough that I feel like, okay, there's a little more wiggle room than I thought. Mm-hmm. Still not enough, but some. Basically, what I've found is that you have to remember something, which is, and how you solve some of these problems, like as a core problem, is information diet, not just ecosystem, but the individual diet that they consume. You just have to remember it is vastly more poison than it was when we grew up. And so you can get people who can be turned radicalized or otherwise have objectionable views, and they're not necessarily bad people. They have an information diet. Now, some of them are far gone. I just want to be clear. Like, there's not much you can do with some of them. But enough of them exist that I've been able to move in certain ways that caught my attention. For example, number one, certain issues you might imagine are more uniting than I thought they would be. And in fact, this one has very much surprised me. You can't see it on this picture because I'm cropped out, but I have two flags over on my shelf. One is the flag of DC, and the other is the flag of Lebanon. My mother is Lebanese. I'm a white guy, but my mother is Lebanese. And I've always been pro-Palestinian my whole life. It's been an animating issue my whole life. Yeah, I don't know if you can see. Yeah, right there. There's the I got that in Lebanon, by the way, and then there's the DC flag. You can see it right there, with a Sean Price doll that I have. But the issue in Gaza is far more uniting than I realized. They are open to the argument both that Trump is complicit, that this is a moral atrocity of enormous proportion, and that certainly, I mean, anytime there's any left-wing culpability, they're keen to recognize it. But they can see it here too in ways that I did not necessarily anticipate. That has been somewhat surprising. Now, so what my point to that is, to the extent you can promote a true, genuine, non-interventionist foreign policy, they will listen to you. They will listen to you. I am telling you, they will listen to you. They can hate a lot of other things about you. That is surprisingly powerful. The other one is powerful but difficult, which is that these guys have seen me grow up on camera. I've had people who've been following me since the 2000s or the early 2010s, and I grew up. I've gotten gray. I'm going gray like it's a contest. You know what I mean? And they've seen it. And I'm married now. I wasn't always married when I was on camera, and I have a daughter now. And they've watched me get older, and they've watched me try to solve problems of parenthood. They know about the fact that I've had, some previous experiences that like they also had, and they've watched me over time try to show them a face of what like being humanity, just having humanity for other people over the course of time, through your relationships with women, through your relationships with children, through your relationships with your neighbors, and what this looks like in a person's life. And I have had people write me, and they'll say to me, like, the first 2 years I hated your views, but I liked your MMA coverage, so I stuck it out. You know what I mean? But then their life changed a little. My life changed a little bit, and they saw that, and it began to make them trust me, and it began to make them hear me. And then it was like an avalanche. Once a few things broke, a bunch of things broke. I don't know how to turn that into 6 months. I just don't know. But I do know that them having exposure to me through formative stages of my life, while I did my best, and I'm sure I have failed, but trying to be humane, trying to show them humanity, trying to show what it means to be responsible to self and others, it worked. It worked. It converted a bunch of them. I get all kinds of testimonials like that. I just wish I had a better idea about how to shorten that. I don't.
Yeah. Well, first of all, on the hair, you got to get on them enhancements, man. You got to get your enhancement game together, man.
You know what? I do a podcast and my co-host dyes his hair, and he's on me. He's like, you got to do it. No, I refuse. I'm going to let nature take its course, and I'm going to be how nature made me. That's what I'm going to do. I believe in that.
I'm like a couple months from getting a whole man unit, like Steve Harvey style that he used to have. I'm going to show up with that. And then as far as, the two prescriptions that you offered, the second one is really something that I grapple with. I don't know if you heard when I opened, when I opened this, but that's something that I grapple with every single time I sit down here, because a lot of times I'm talking about scenarios that are enraging and infuriating, and people are righteously wanting to have their feelings validated through the people whose channels they align with. Like I'm upset, you're upset, he should be upset. But I'm also approaching it from a standpoint of, okay, at some point, if we want to reach a critical mass of opposition, the object of this frustration has to be turned to a vessel for support, just purely for that opposition to reach some critical mass, and trying to establish some kind of class consciousness, right? In order to try and get people to look across your disenfranchised group and see all of these other fractured disenfranchised groups and how you have been prevented from coalescing into any substantive opposition. Balancing, reacting in defense of your own existence and ability to continue to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness with trying to create some deeper, coalitions is a struggle that I have like on a daily basis. Like I remember in the immediate aftermath of the election, there were a lot of people that I knew, but also a lot of creators, specifically Black creators, that didn't want to hear from anybody. They didn't want to hear from anybody. They didn't want to talk to anybody. And I didn't not feel that way, which is a very, I didn't not feel that. But I also, out of respect for what just happened and me kind of processing it in a similar way, I didn't react in a similar way, but I processed it in a similar way. I was unable to have any real objection with their reaction. Like, I'm like, you know what I mean? Like you got to give people time. Like that was just a monumental rejection. It was almost like one of those hypotheticals that they ask you, like, would America ever elect a Black woman as president? I don't know. Well, how about if it was a felon? I don't know. Well, how about if we had to go to court to get him put out last time? I don't know. Well, how about if it was Access Hollywood? You know what I mean? Like that's literally what happened, right? So I say all that to say it's a constant struggle of trying to, I talked about my need to walk away from even being around a sport that I used to enjoy as a palate cleanser from all the stuff that was going on in my life, my inability to do that because that followed and it has now completely infused that thing. So the idea of, re-engaging with and this is not specific to MMA, I'm just saying re-engaging in general for the good of humanity sounds awful. But I also recognize it's necessity. That is the balance, you know what I mean, that I feel almost every time I sit here.
Man, it's just candidly, for example, let's talk about DC for just a quick second. It did not, I'm not, okay. I know DC well enough to say there's no possible way I can speak for it. No, I have DC's best interest, I think, in my heart, but I can't speak for it. There's a story to tell about where DC's been and who it is and what makes it DC. And I don't think I'm the best guy for that. So in advocating for DC, I always try to remember that position in how I advocate for it, because I do believe it needs people to support it who live here and who love it. But, DC culture, this is not news to you, but I know like DC culture is Black culture. Like that's just what it is, right? Because that's who's been here. That's who has made it up. That's the kind of like advocate in a public facing way that it needs. I can do a part, but it's not my story to tell. And so, it's very difficult for me to like hear what you have to say and then be like, well, Reese, you need to re-engage with them. It's like, you have to do the labor of convincing these people, even though many of them loathe your existence and want to penalize it. Like, how do I tell someone to do that? I can't be that guy, But what I can do is, one, I'm not penalized in the same kind of way. That's not a good reason, but I can make some good use of it, right? I mean, there's a way to leverage it.
Yeah.
But the truth is, man, this is a place I've come to now in my life, and I've had opinions change. I'm sure you have as well. I've had opinions change over time and get shaped, and like new information changed it. I don't know if I've ever been more sure of something now about what I'm going to say. And the good news is you can reach them with this. But even if like you couldn't, just because it's the truth, dude, inequality in its various forms, including but not limited to economic inequality, is destabilizing for society, period. You can't have a functioning society if people feel locked out. it will just turn bad. They will turn on each other. They will check out. The amount of downstream malignant things that emerge when you just let people die because they are living under enormous amounts of medical debt, when you allow for ingrained racial hierarchy, when you don't have an electoral system that people feel like that works for them, when you have politicians who meaningfully don't do shit. They don't solve problems, or they don't lead from the front, and they let things fester, and you get locked out of society. This is so bad. It is so bad and cancerous. And the reality is, any politician who thinks that can or should be contained, especially if they're on the left, you must go. You must go. There is no future for this country, and I truly believe that, if we are willing to tolerate people being locked out. Period. It won't work. It cannot work. It is absolutely the core thing that will either save us or sink us. Do we want to solve this problem? Because if we don't, then there is no other half-ass solution that's going to get us there. People cannot be pressed on in this way for this long and let things fester and then expect things to just continue like that forever. These things come to an end. And if they come to an end on their own, they come to an end violently. We don't want that. We want them to come to an end because we are replacing it with something that is not locking people out, that is helping people to live more meaningful lives, that is giving them the things that they need. Whether it's healthcare, whether it's, fair hiring practices, whatever that may be. There's many ways you can define this. But I believe that absolutely firmly. And I had this conversation with a buddy of mine. I'll wrap up on this. I had a buddy of mine. He center right is what I would call him. And I asked him before the election, I was like, who do you agree with more about? We were talking about something. And he was like, I share more of Elon Musk's view. And I said, my guy, how can you possibly say that you share a worldview more like Elon Musk? Are you on ketamine now? No, you're not. Your daughter goes to public school. My daughter goes to public school. You drive a Mazda. I drive a Mazda. We drive on the same roads. We have the same tax code. Our lives are the same. Your life is nothing like his. His needs, his reality, and what he wants could not be more divorced from yours if you tried. Wake up. We have the same life. And 6 months later, he didn't believe me at the time. 6 months later, after the failures of Doge and everything else, he came back to me and goes, I can't believe I didn't understand it at the time, but now I see it. This is the message. It is us versus them, and we cannot let them have it.
You talked about people being locked out, and that actually was, you got to grasp at straws when things look the way they looked on November 5th, 4th, whatever that is. You grasp at straws. I approached January with the mindset that the MAGA coalition was completely unstable by virtue of it being undergirded by billionaires but in support of this populist movement, right? For these working class Americans in middle America, and all the land that you see when you see the map that has all the red and the blue, all the land that voted, all those people on top of all the being. And so it's by nature unstable. So I said, we'll see in January exactly where he decides to go. And it became apparent in January that he was going to ride with the money. So I said, okay, well, he can't out that as aggressively as he can't go that hard for the money, or else it'll become readily apparent. It's the reason why a long con is more effective than a smash and grab. Like, you don't want the bells and whistles for this is what I'm doing. You want people to suffer slowly over time. You don't want to hit them across the face. That gives them an opportunity to defend themselves. But he did it again and again and again. And I said, this is wild, because I'm like, this doesn't make any logical sense. Like, if you actually wanted to run game, you definitely don't want to be this loud and hot about the fact that you're running game. But then it leads me to say, okay, if that's how he's going to go about it, that forces me to conclude that they're very well aware of the writing on the wall, and they want to take what they can take while they can take it. And I actually had my buddy Brandon come on, and he said something similar about him feeling like they knew that these institutions were failing, and they knew that we're going to have to restructure society. So they said, we're going to put ourselves in the best possible position when that moment comes to protect ourselves from all the carnage.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what they've done. That's why, I mean, you know, as we started the conversation by saying Trump 1 was bad. It was, don't get me wrong, it was bad. But it wasn't like this. This is different. This is them trying to, I mean, they're literally trying to remake society as we understand it. They're trying to take over higher education to the extent possible, to say who can teach and what you can teach, and what you can get funding for research on and what you can't, but along, you know, expressly partisan lines, not so much clear scientific guidelines. They're trying to reinstitute what I think is, I'm just going to call neo-segregation in a lot of these anti-DEI policies, because remember, it's not just about, oh, we're going to roll back some of the affirmative action of the 90s. No. This is about undoing its connection to the civil rights era. I mean, even Charlie Kirk had said, I believe, it's kind of funny, like, I mean, it's not funny, but I'm saying his death was obviously an enormous news story, but I didn't know much about him, to be honest with you. I had seen him previously, and I did not find him to be a very interesting speaker, and I just kind of didn't pay attention after that. And then obviously I found out after the fact that he had a huge audience and blah, blah, blah. The point I'm trying to make is even he had said that. Christopher Rufo, who has been key about, you know, for example, among many things, including but not limited to the dissolution or the shrinkage of the education department, has made it very clear they want to remake institutions. They want to remake society. They want to change preferences. And as I mentioned, starting today, there was news about Mark Andreessen. So you have Mark Zuckerberg, a donor who owns Meta. You have Jeff Bezos, Trump donor, owns Washington Post. You have Twitter, Elon Musk. Need I say more? You now have TikTok with Andreessen and Silver Lake. Obviously, he's a close associate of Trump. Like, holy shit, dude, we're surrounded. We are surrounded. They are trying to take what was there and absolutely shape it by force. And not just that, you know, if you actually look at Trump's polling, dude, and I'm sure you've talked about this a million times, his polling is terrible. It's not good. I mean, there's some things that are better than others, but it's definitely bad. He is underwater on a lot of issues, including core ones, and certain forms of immigration polling he's even underwater on. The point I'm trying to make is, does it look to you like they're governing, like they want to run on this record? You know, this is what I mean. It's taking everything by force. And I'll say this as well. In boxing, did you hear what they're trying to do with boxing?
No, I saw that you had talked about boxing being in trouble, but
it's all connected. It's all connected because it's a symptom of a broader problem, which is that what's happening is, if you are connected to this administration in a way where you're a donor, a significant donor, your vision is going to play out in one way or the other. Or if you're connected and you're favored to them, you're going to get favors one way or the other, right? So what they're trying to do is, you think of the UFC, you think of MMA, oh, that's distinct from boxing, which it is, except something happened. There's a parent company to UFC called TKO. They also own WWE. What they're trying to do is they're trying to get, MMA only has state by state legislation. Boxing has that plus federal regulation. The most important one of those is called the Muhammad Ali Boxing Reform Act. Funnily enough, John McCain was the one who actually shepherded this through, and I give him credit for it because it's actually really important. They're trying to undo that. They're trying to undo, like, why does Canelo make 100 million, 150 million, and an MMA fighter can't make more than for a single purse? I believe some have made 20 million, but most of them, the high ones, are in the teens. It's not an accident. It's because there are rules governing boxing that make it that way, that gives the athlete leverage such that they can demand those paydays. That leverage by law does not exist in MMA. TKO has now had one Republican, one Democrat legislators in the House introduce legislation called cynically the Muhammad Ali American Boxing Revival Act. And what they want is an exemption so that basically they don't have to obey any of the Ali Act rules, including around who holds the titles, who holds ranking, transparency, contract length, everything that the Muhammad Ali Boxing Reform Act seeks to protect. They want exemptions for. And I got to tell you, it's probably going to pass. Boxing as you know it is going to change fundamentally, probably in 2026. But what's the common thread between that and everything else that I mentioned? It is designer legislation being given to Ari Emanuel, who's, a Trump donor, but he's nominally on the left, but, a very powerful and connected guy with all these other powerful investors who are all Trump aligned, Dana White, Trump aligned. These are guys, maybe the whole Paramount thing went through because they approved it. These are oligarchs who are getting designer bespoke legislation. If there is a federal protection that's not bolted to the floor, they're going to rip it out. And it's whether it's boxing, whether it's making the EPA declare if there are microplastics in water, whether it's, you name it, anything in between, it's up for grabs. That's what's happening. And that's why this message of, fellas, it's us and then it's them. And I'm telling you, you're not in that club and they don't care about you. That's what we have to hammer home relentlessly.
Wow. I want to ask, I'm assuming there's been significant opposition from within boxing, but that presumes organization and collective action within boxing. So I guess
very quickly, there has been some, little more than you think. It's actually MMA advocacy groups that are lending their expertise to the boxing side. But two of the architects of the Muhammad Ali Boxing Reform Act came out and said, one's a lawyer, and I'm not sure what the other one is, but one's a lawyer, and they were like, this is terrible. This new proposed legislation is everything we don't want. But what kind of environment are we in? They're taking rebar out of the concrete of our federal, democracy. That is what they're doing.
Wow. That is.
Yeah.
That's
I got a
more
gloomy
upsetting
outlook,
than
man.
I thought it was going to be. That's more upsetting than I thought it was going to be. And I got a whole rant about the MMA side of that and the demonization of people, the Francis Ngannous and the Cain Velasquez's of the world. But I won't, we'll have that conversation in person. But
all right.
I do appreciate that. Shout out to Deshauna, who says she likes Luke Thomas. Bring him back. Absolutely. Miss Siren, they don't care about hypocrisy. He agrees with you there. K. Charmaine, beauty of unifying in truth. Now, I'm not going to sit you down and just talk about the right wing the entire time, because that would be part of the problem, right? In terms of where we go from here, it's funny you talk about us being surrounded on the communication front, because when we get into the myriad of ways in which people hurt themselves, like the farmers that are having a whole support thing on Saturday. But when we get into the myriad of ways, I just say that because I turned the TV and it was on there. But when we get into the myriad of ways in which people hurt themselves and the complete chasm, and I mean chasm, in getting your message across between the left and the right. We just saw it this week with Charlie Kirk, where they had prosecuted the case of who the perpetrator was before we even had a suspect. Didn't have a name, a face, or anything. And there was already a case being made, which you then have to go through and undo and unpack once you actually... It's a mess how far behind the left is. And so in the many ways in which I scream about, some of the stuff that flies and gets off the ground, that also comes with frustration at the left's inability to close this gap or communicate their message effectively. Because pain and difficulty is a communicator. It is. But then also, if you can't get your message across, that will just be laid at your feet, which we've also seen as something that they might try and do, is lay the effects of the big, beautiful bill at Democrats when it comes time for midterms, which, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? I just need to know from you, does that frustrate you as much as it does me? And what is your prescription for that?
It does. It's extremely frustrating. It seems like also a very difficult problem to solve, because what you're referencing is a lot of the Medicare cuts that go into play won't until after the midterms. So like 2027 is when a lot of them go in. And it's like, even if the Democrats win, are they going to get blamed? Because now that's when all of the bad stuff happens. I mean, you know, it's true. There is some level of political opportunism no matter what. I mean, I'm sure you saw, I think it was beginning of this week, last week, something like that, when there was a bunch of infrastructure projects that came from Biden's Build Back Better, or whatever the name of it was, I forget now. But you know, Trump puts a stein on it, taking credit for it, and it's like, you know, yes, I mean, some degree of either blame or praise will be phony. But how do you break through? How do you reach them? And what is the messaging? Honestly, to be quite clear with you, I think, again, partly you do have to recognize, I'm not sure if some of them are reachable. I just think that's real. I mean, it's like, who are the people that's like, you know, who would, you know, there's various polls out there. It's like, no matter how bad it gets for Trump, he's kind of hovering high 20s, low 30s, right, among certain kinds of polls. Like, I think there's just a bunch of them that are just not reachable. I want to be very clear. So there's other people to various degrees that are reachable. There's enough of them that I think that it does matter. The reality is, dude, you got to copy what they do. That's what they do. They respond to power. They respond to leading in an intimidating way. They respond to a show of strength. They respond to, you know, not backing down. They respond to, now they're also responding to kind of edgelord stuff. And I don't know how you do that in a world where you're trying to promote, you know, some degree of inclusivity. But at the same time, like, for example, I'm not the biggest Gavin Newsom fan. I want to be clear about that. However, this thing where he mocks Trump and just does exactly what he does, and it drives all of them nuts. It's not accidental that worked. It drove them nuts because he used their playbook to do exactly their thing, Trump's thing, and it had an obvious effect. It was, I mean, completely had them on their heels the whole time. I'm not saying all of us have to copy Trump directly. That's not my point. But in a communication style, you want to reason with the centrists, but then there's other folks you're just going to have to win over with razzle dazzle. That's just where we are. Like, the idea of a public intellectual coming down and then, you know, raining wisdom upon us, these days they're not here right now. Maybe they'll be in the future, but they're not here now, and that's not the world we're living in. We live in a world of consistent, loud, intimidating drumbeat. Bang after day, bang is what you have to do. And also, you have to have better messengers. That's just the reality too. That's truth in media. This is why, like, you know, I canceled my New York Times subscription, and I'm sorry to say I did. I canceled my Washington Post subscription. I spend that money on independent, like, Substack creators, or, you know, you name it. I'm giving money to the people who need it, both in message and in scope of business. But more than that, our elected leaders. I don't know how you feel, and I know everyone's different, but I really believe this party cannot go anywhere with Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries. I'm sorry, I don't believe that they can. I don't believe that in a moment where they're being literally raked over the coals, well, not literally, but they're being metaphorically raked over the coals by the president, by the attorney general, the party's being called terrorists. There was an article in the Federalist about how the Democratic Party is a party of terrorism, and where are they? They are silent. They are nowhere. I haven't seen them do anything about it. Nothing. They're quiet. They believe in limiting the far left to appease the right. I am not interested in their leadership. In either case, I think that they are not useful. You need people who can bang that drum, and then you have to do it relentlessly, with force, without compromise, day after day. It is white knuckle time, now. I don't believe this is a time for like, we have to, you want to be able to be convincing, but you don't want to be convincing to the point of being conciliatory. You want to be convincing through it, like partly a little bit of intimidation, a little bit, but that comes through a show of strength that you have to give them. And lastly, the thing I'd say is to bind us all up. I mean, not every person needs to be this way, but you and I need to be this way, which is if you're going to argue for this stuff publicly, you should believe it. And if you believe it, should not be hard to argue for it. It should not be. It should be very easy to do. This is what I believe. This is why I believe it. This is the evidence. Fuck you. That's my attitude.
The irony that the last two topics we had in my mind are related, because when you talk about democratic leadership trying to limit the far left to appease the right, well, the thing is, because they're running circles around you when it comes to messaging and communication, they tie you to the far left regardless of what you do. So all you're doing, it's kind of like the brand that decides not to do the thing because they don't get canceled. Oh, you think they're all going to run out and buy your thing now? All the people that just posted all the stuff about how much they hate you? No. All you did was upset the people that actually did support you and were willing to push your message.
They have no instinct for it, which is why they fail at it constantly. They what the problem is? I'll tell you the truth. I never really hear it get this discussed because I talk to people who are too young to know the difference. But perhaps you appear to be younger than me. You're certainly more youthful. But perhaps you can understand what I'm about to say, which is if you grew up like I did. So I graduated high school in '98, college 2002. So that was my time into my 20s. I grew up in a world where conservatives have always wanted to have an alternative something because they did not have the centers of power. They didn't have universities. They didn't own mass media. So, for example, right, even locally, right, we know the difference. The Washington Times existed, but the real paper when we grew up was the Washington Post, right? That was the thing. And, you could be on AM radio and you could talk about conservative stuff in later, but the real thing was FM radio. That's where the big boy jobs were. They always had this lesser than alternative. But then when media got shook up and everything got leveled out where you can be a big YouTube star and a big Substack person and you can have a huge indie following, much more so, in fact, than some of the corporate overlords, and the access to information and the pipeline that came with that, it completely reshuffled everyone. The point I'm making is liberals got used to conservatives having shittier, less, like they were the generic product and they were the name brand, and then everything switched and they had no muscles that they'd ever trained to deal with an adversary that is now capable in a way you never imagined at a force level that you have no preparedness for, and they got put on their heels. And I think now they're trying to get up a little bit, which is why you see a little bit of rumblings of something, but that like all that time it was dominated one way and now it's not, and those people just don't know what to do.
By the way, I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and I want to get you out of here so you come back and not think of it as that thing that kept you here forever.
I appreciate it.
I gotta get two things in before you go. I gotta get your thoughts on Bud. But before that, you had this video, or you had a video you posted about men and why some men hate women. I think that was like the title of the video.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really interesting to me as somebody that I'm not very well acquainted with the so-called manosphere and kind of like these male echo chambers and how they work and how they exist. I kind of grew up in like a world where I got mocked and made fun of. And so I just stopped trying to date for like 5-6 years until I left town and went to New York, where I could reinvent myself and make up a bunch of stories and then casually work my way up to socially acceptable. I thought that was just what people did. What happened? And what is going on in these silos? Like I'm so ignorant of this. So I realize I'm like asking like as an outsider, but what happened?
I'm partly still trying to figure it out. The best I can tell you is when we grew up, if you wanted to talk to girls on a romantic level, you kind of had to risk it. You just had to do it. Like, you had to figure out a way to do it. And some did it better than others, obviously. But at some point, you know, through life, you just kind of if you have to do it, you get better at it over time and blah, blah, blah.
Wait a minute. I got to pause you right there.
Yeah.
Luke, because we're of a similar age. There was a quarterback named Drew Bledsoe in the 90s. He was the pre-Tom Brady quarterback of the New England Patriots. And this was during the early Dan Snyder years where our team was completely unwatchable. So I just adopted the Patriots because Drew Bledsoe would back up and throw the ball 50 times a game, which was unheard of at that time. He would just back up and just throw the ball. And this was the same age where I looked like and sounded like and was called Steve Urkel on a daily basis.
Oh, man.
So what I decided was if I ever wanted to get there, I had to Drew Bledsoe it. So what I would do is I would go to Pentagon City Mall, or I would go to St. Charlestown Mall, and I would just stay there and just get my Drew Bledsoe. I would just get my Drew Bledsoe. Excuse me, can I talk to you? No. They probably would have escorted me from the premises. But that's what you had to do at that time, just getting shot up like Sonny Corleone at the Causeway. But that's what I did to reach social acceptance.
Bro, at some level, you realize it's a numbers game. You know what I mean? Like, there's a certain amount of no's you got to go through before you get a yes. And that's just the game you're in. And if you're handsome or you're pretty, there's a lot fewer no's. But, you know, that's just the game you're in. But the point I'm trying to make is, like, there was just a degree of social ability that was forced on one another. You had to have it to have anything. Like, there was some people retreated to the internet because it was in its relatively early-ish kinds of stages, but most of life was not on the computer. The vast majority of life was still in person, especially the bigger rewards. Like, you had to live that way. And just none of that is in play anymore. Now it is not just can you retreat to these places. These places are the preeminent places to be, these online places, not just social media, of course, but these deep, deep internet rabbit holes that these guys go down. And partly what happens is sometimes they go down to these places because they might not have enough confidence to begin with. They've never developed muscle memory. In other cases, they'll have bad experiences with women, either like bad authority figures. They'll have, abusive or terrible mothers, or, some kind of figure in their life that attracted them to that place. And then they come enmeshed in this world where it's just a bunch of damaged people giving other damaged people deeply damaged worldview advice. Terrible. And then it snowballs and radicalizes, and then it hardens. And once it hardens, that's when it's really hard to undo. That's when it takes a thing. The video that I made about it was very simple, which was I grew up. I didn't realize it fully at the time. Now I can say it. If you'd asked me back then, I'm not sure what answer I would have given you. But now I can say I probably hated women in the early part of my life. And again, not in a super conscious way. I had romantic partners, like long-standing ones. But that doesn't mean that you don't have like. Am I back? I'm back. Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm good.
No, all good.
The point I'm trying to make is, very quickly, that my mom died tragically when I was 23, and it set me on a path. And as a consequence of this path that I was on, because she died and because it was so tragic, I went to therapy for like I'd been going to therapy because my parents got divorced, but I really went to therapy because I had to do it to live. Like, I was in a bad way, and I decided to chase it. So I was like, okay, why do I feel this way about women? Like, where does all this come from? And I wanted to see if there was anything to what I had believed from an evidentiary standpoint. Like, oh, they inherently have these characteristics, or the evidence tells us that they will fail men in this particular way, or these kinds of arrangements work best in the house. Any kind of stupid idea you can think of. I chased it, and I came up short every time. And I had this conversation with the therapist I was seeing at the time. And what they basically unpacked was that I had just created a world to deal with the life that I had. And this was my dumb way. She didn't call me dumb, but that's how I feel about it, like a dumb way of trying to make sense of it. Now, imagine you didn't have any outside help. And imagine, in fact, that if all my friends also dated girls, imagine if none of them did. and all of them are online. Now, where are you? You are in a completely different universe. And so women become something that is to their mind, unrecognizable to me. Like their vision of it is so off, but they are left to their own devices. This gets back to the conversation you had previously about, I don't want to do the work to engage. Believe me, dude, and it's not your responsibility. But left to their own devices, like, look what you get. You get messed up people. And we have to the extent that it's possible, we have to break that grip on them. And again, the last thing I'll say on this is I just try to show, like, I had a guy being like, oh, I have trouble dating and blah, blah, blah. And I was asking him questions. I'm like, have you tried being nice to women? Tried being nice? It's a lot easier to get them to like you when you're nice to them. And not in a performative way, because you like them. Like, you're actually nice to them because you like them. And this, honestly, he told me that thought had never even crossed his mind. Wow. Like, holy shit, like that's who you're talking about here. So there's what we got, man. The Last of Us, who got like the analog world into digital, dude, we got the best of both worlds. We did because now all the super destructive stuff is hitting this other generation's youth, and I don't want it for them, but we dodged that bullet.
I lament that sometimes, because I think about what I could have done if I had like a screen where I could take shots without having to put my self-esteem on the craps table, just time after time after time. But clearly the grass isn't necessarily greener. Clearly there was some growth that was to be had. But our age group's a weird one, because we're like the youngest people that also don't know about some of the new, like, streaming and some of that stuff that goes on. I'm like, bro, I can't. I don't know.
Dude, they made a movie when we were our age, The Truman Show, and it was like kind of like a dark-ish comedy. Now people are just doing it. They're just like, hey, I'm just going to stream my life all the time. What?
I get asked, my Miss Ray, who helps me out here on the channel, is always like, oh, we should start posting. We should start doing stuff on Kick and this, that, and the other. I'm like, I can do like 3 social medias. Like, I could just pick 3. If you want me to do a new one, something's got to go. I can't be managing. I can do 3. That's it. Okay. First of all, this has been awesome. I really appreciate. It's amazing how much convergence there is. I'm like, Ant made the case, but he didn't make the case well enough for how much we would have to talk about. So I really thoroughly appreciate it. Your thoughts on what you saw this weekend from Terrence Blake Crawford?
Man, he's so special. He's so special. Wow. So in July of 2023, I was there when he fought Errol Spence. And he had a fight in between that one and this one against this guy named Israel Madrimov. Some people saw it, not many. It's not as consequential, but those are the 2 most consequential fights of his career. There's the Spence fight, and then this past weekend's Canelo fight. And there's video of this. This is true. What I'm about to tell you is easily verifiable. I felt like watching Bud beat Spence in that T-Mobile arena. You ever seen, like, I'm not a fan. I mean, I don't hate opera, but I'm not like a dedicated fan of it. You ever seen, like, you'd see these, like, the 3 tenors, like Pavarotti, that he'd be singing, and there'd be women crying in the audience, like the beauty of it. And he'd be like, wow, man, I've never had that feeling watching a music artist. I mean, I've banged my head a few times, but it never moved me like that. There is video of me shedding a couple of tears after that fight, because I swear to God, I was so blown away by how smart, just what a genius he is. Just what a genius he is. Because I was working for Showtime for that fight, and Showtime was the one that aired the fight. And it was a funny story, right? So they came to me before the fight and they were like, hey, we want you to do a breakdown, a preview, like, of this big fight. I was like, great, let's do it. And then they gave me all the footage, and they had everything for Errol because he fought on PBC. So, that's all their stuff. So that's like, that's Sean Peters. Excuse me, what am I saying?
Sean Porter.
Sean Porter. I talked to him on Friday. Ugas and Kell Brook and Algieri. I mean, you name it, everybody. And then we had to get the footage from Top Rank, which was Bud's previous promoter at that time, and they only gave us highlights. So I had to go back to Showtime and be like, I don't think I can do this because I just don't have enough footage. So they said, okay, then you know what? Just do a Spence preview, and we'll just call it a day. So I did a Spence preview, and I remember going into the fight thinking, okay, I know Bud is good, but dude, the tape on Spence, never been knocked down, undefeated, a hammering southpaw, just got in your face, broke Kell Brook's face, broke Yordenis Ugas's face, like literally was breaking dudes' faces on the way to this thing. And then Bud, a pound for pound guy, and Bud abused him, made him look like nothing. He hasn't fought since. He has been effectively retired. I mean, dude, this guy, I never seen a destruction like that. Now, you didn't get a destruction on Saturday with Canelo. No, that didn't happen. But I as through this breakdown, I went and I rewatched the fight, and I said to myself when it was over, I know that Bud won cleanly, 115, 113 twice, and then 116, 112. But honestly, I'm not sure how many rounds I can give Canelo. Like, Bud was clearly better. Third weight class, completely undisputed. Dude, I watched Mayweather at his peak. I don't know if he can do what Bud can do. And I don't think I've ever said that about anyone after Mayweather. Mayweather has always been the level of excellence for like technical superiority, like the highest level of chess, Bud might be a higher player than him. Like, and I cannot believe I'm saying that. He is once in a generation, as special as they come. Lucky to have watched an operator like that.
Wow. That is strong. That was a lot of conversation that I heard. I literally went to the barbershop. I know it's cliche, but I literally went to the barbershop on Monday, and there was like conversation about the fight. How come nobody's bringing up Mayweather? Everybody's saying, Bud owns, a lot of beef with Kellerman. I love Max. I thought he did a brilliant job. I had no issues with him. He was pro Canelo. But then they also are like, oh, well, they didn't bring up Floyd and this, that, and other thing. I'm like, look, I don't have the expertise to compare Floyd and Bud. Like, I'm not even going to sign up for that. But you're like the first guy that I've heard like talk about it. Putting those two side by side. But it is really amazing to see. He, as a novice, he's able to display a degree of excellence that I can access without just being like a Mike Tyson type figure. Obviously, everybody can see the guy that's the knockout artist, but me seeing his level of comfort and him ducking in and out and, the jab, like things that are like, I can be, things that I can appreciate. And I think that says a whole lot.
He doesn't have a flashy game.
Mm-hmm.
His game is not flashy. He's not Pacquiao battering, like these blitzes and jumping in and out and craziness. It's super oh my God, dude. Like, you watch this guy, he rarely makes a mistake. I cannot believe how good his defense. Again, it's not, again, he's not doing crazy things. It's just his elbow and hands are always in the right place. His chin is always in the right place. There's another thing. Like, dude, he's always super well balanced, which is why when was the last time you saw him trip over his own punches or fall back? You never see that because he's super well balanced, super fundamental boxing, hardcore fundamentals from top to freaking bottom. That's why I think it's so accessible, because he's not doing anything flashy, but he's doing everything technical.
We got a couple of Ricky Hatton RIPs.
Oh,
so definitely want to put that out too while we're on topic. I appreciate you guys for keeping us honest in that regard. Okay. Oh, yep. Deshauna, Luke, you are now our cousin. You are welcome.
I'll take it.
That is definitely true. Sir, that was awesome. I thoroughly appreciated
Thank you so
your
much.
insight. and there's a whole lot of inside baseball I'd love to talk to you about. So we gotta catch up offline at some point. But you have a video coming out tomorrow. I think I saw that was scheduled to go out.
I don't think. I think that's just. I think that is repurposed content.
Okay.
It's not an original video, but I do fresh. Like literally a couple hours before I got on with you, my Bud breakdown is out, and I'm pretty proud of that one. So please go check that one out.
Awesome, and that one is just at Luke Thomas. So
That's right.
Luke Thomas Gets Political, which has been scrolling this whole time, and there's also at Luke Thomas if you want to get your MMA and your combat sports content. Anything else that you want to point to that you want to push on the way out?
I just want to say it's great to see another DC guy doing great. I really appreciate you having me on, and thank you so much. Very generous of you to spend your time with me. I appreciate it.
Oh, for sure. This has been a real thrill, and I would love to have you back, man, anytime.
All right.
Shout out to all the mods. I appreciate. Hopefully, this has been the easiest mod job you guys have had in a week. So this has been good. It's been hairy for them, but I definitely appreciate you guys, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for the premiere. And I'll end as I always do. Luke, you're not going to get this at all, but it's just a random thing how we always end the lives, because the one person, when I asked what should be the last word, this is what they said: soak your feet.